In the past few weeks and in recent days, this topic has come up again. There is a lot of information claiming that supposedly the United States of America and Russia are conducting some kind of secret economic negotiations and are ready to make some business deals. So I suggest we figure out what's in the leaks, what the insiders are saying, what's on the business radar, and what Donald Trump's team is actually doing in communication with Moscow. Because in the past couple of weeks, there's been a lot of smoke. Bloomberg wrote that the United States and Russia are aiming for a truce that would cement Russian control over the captured territories. The Wall Street Journal reported secret talks between ExxonMobil and Rosneft about rejoining the Sakhalin-one project pending White House approval. At the same time, Steve Witkoff said that he has daily contacts with Moscow and a scheduled meeting with the Ukrainian delegation in New York this week. So let's break down, let's say, the realities, the facts of the leak and who has what interests. What exactly is appearing in the news agenda right now regarding the alleged secret negotiations between Moscow and Washington? I'm Alexei Pechi. Today is August 27th now, everything in order. But before we start, I ask you to subscribe to this channel, give it a like, leave any comment, and be sure to subscribe to my Telegram channel, Pechi News. The link to it is in the description of this video. Now let's go through everything in order, very briefly. The first thing that has come up in recent days is that supposedly Moscow and Washington are changing the format of negotiations and, in general, the format of ending the war. That is the peace deal that will officially end the war. So, Bloomberg, citing its sources, writes that the parties, Moscow and Washington, are aiming for a ceasefire that will freeze the front line and postpone disputed issues for later. So, is this beneficial for Moscow? There is a fixation, just a fixation. For Kiev, this is unacceptable because this legalizes territory seizure. Washington is holding a pause to bargain over security guarantees for Ukraine. So, no signatures, no dates, it's just an intention in the air. This information is just another option for discussing what might someday be brought up for public discussion. What does the Wall Street Journal say about the cooperation and economic deals between Moscow and Washington? It says that ExxonMobil has indeed entered into closed negotiations with Rosneft regarding a potential return to the Sakhalin-one project if there is political approval as part of a possible peace agreement package in the war between Russia and Ukraine. So the meaning is clear. Big business is always trying to draw a map called "What if there's peace tomorrow? What will we do?" Because investments and supply chains aren't built in a week. Of course, American business is trying to figure out what steps it can take. So if a peace agreement is really reached, Trump will give the green light. They need to understand how to act. But it's important to understand that this isn't a done deal yet. It's preparation for how to act in case some kind of peace agreement is actually signed. That's what this is about. We need to know what incentives might be offered in return for genuine action from Moscow. These discussions, for example, about the Americans being ready to buy Russian icebreakers to operate on the Northern Sea route. Talks about how the Americans are almost ready to hand over Alaska to the Russians for development. Talks about how the Americans are ready to re-enter the development of the liquefied natural gas sector in Russia, and so on and so forth. All of this is about probing American business. What can they do if the situation really turns out so that Trump says, it's all green light, you can go ahead and do business with the Russians? There is no deal yet. The third pillar, what is Trump's team actually doing? The third question to discuss. Witkoff is not hiding behind wording here. Witkoff says the following, quote, "I'm meeting with Ukrainians in New York this week. We speak with the Russian side daily. A bilateral meeting is possible, but President Trump is needed at the final stage." The second element is the sanctions lever, which Donald Trump reiterated again yesterday. He stated that if there is no progress in the peace process, he is ready to impose the toughest possible sanctions against Russia. He said we're discussing the economy, not a world war, suggesting it specifically involves Russia, specifically an economic war with the Russians, not a hot military phase. These are two real actions that can be measured. So whether there is a meeting between Putin and Zelensky or not, whether there are sanctions or not, Everything else is just noise for now. Yes, unfortunately, all of this is really being discussed. Business topics between Russians and Americans are being discussed. But everything will depend on what the peace agreement will be like and how, based on it, Trump will react to the war of such cooperation. Why is this important for Ukraine? Because a ceasefire for the sake of a ceasefire, as Bloomberg writes, without automation and security guarantees, is unfortunately just a pause that Moscow will use to regroup. And that's why Kyiv insists on two things. Zelensky has publicly stated in recent weeks that security guarantees for Ukraine should be like Article 5 of the NATO Charter. There should be no legalization of the seizure of Ukrainian territories. There should be no veto rights and especially no involvement of unwashed Russians in providing security guarantees for Ukraine. These are the clear points that we insist on. Where is the line between reality and these secret deals? Between Russians and Americans? Well, it's just a test. If a security guarantees text for Ukraine includes automatic measures like snapback sanctions, all sanctions would be immediately reinstated if Russia breaks the ceasefire. There is strengthening of Ukraine's air defense, funding for Ukrainian defense, a European mission on the ground without Russian involvement. Ensuring security guarantees is a reality. If the talks are about a ceasefire regime with a fixed front line and without automatic measures, it's all smoke, it's not peace. As long as we are not in the first scenario, no one has presented any document that Kyiv could sign. So, for now, it's all just discussion. And yes, why is there such a thing in this picture? There is room for corporate intelligence, let me put it that way. Because any big deal in the world almost always has two layers. There's the political layer, sanctions, guarantees, investment guarantees, the question of war or no war, and so on. The economic layer includes energy, logistics, insurance, contracts, and more. American companies can sense which way the wind is blowing, and, they're already drawing up action plans for the future. This isn't betraying Ukraine, it's just typical big money business. We just can't blink, as they say. Without strict guarantees, without a sanctions snapback, no economic carrot for Moscow should work. That's what we need to insist on. That's why secret agreements between Moscow and Washington are just a loud phrase. But today we only have three solid things. That's right. Indeed, the American delegation, as Steve Witkoff stated, communicates with the Russians almost every day. We don't fully understand what they're talking about. That's a fact. Secondly, the sanctions lever that Trump promises, let me emphasize, promises to use as a very serious measure if there is no progress, in the peace negotiations. And the third fact is Ukraine's tough stance, which I have already voiced regarding security guarantees for Ukraine. Everything else is just rumors, probing the ground, attempts by businesses to understand where they should move, and so on. As soon as all this automation appears on paper and real sanctions hit not just in press releases, but Moscow's oil wallet, that's when we can say the smoke has cleared and some real outcome has begun. For now, I'll repeat once again, we're going to hear a lot of similar news and statements because the negotiation process is still ongoing, which, by the way, the Russians are trying to drag out as much as possible. For what? To get as many carrots as possible? I'll leave it at that. Share your opinions and conclusions in the comments under this episode, subscribe to the channel, hit the bell, and don't forget to like. That's it for now. Take care. Goodbye, everyone.